You ever notice how sometimes the biggest political fights in Washington don't start with wars, elections, or scandals, but with money? Right now, the United States government is standing dangerously close to another shutdown. And this time, the battle is centered around one of the most powerful and sensitive departments in the entire country, the Department of Homeland Security, also known as DHS. This is not just another budget disagreement. This is a high-stakes political showdown that could directly affect airport security, border control, disaster response, immigration enforcement, and even national safety. Lawmakers are clashing, tensions are rising, and the clock is ticking toward a funding deadline that could push America into another partial shutdown. The big question is this about national security, or is this a political power game being played in Washington? And if DHS shuts down, how much could it actually impact everyday Americans? Today, we're breaking down everything you need to know, step by step. So stay with me, because this story is much bigger than it looks. Before we jump deeper into this major political showdown, if you want sharp, intelligent, and deeply analyzed news breakdowns that actually help you understand what's happening behind the headlines, make sure you support the channel by liking this video, subscribing, and turning on notifications. It really helps the channel grow and allows us to keep bringing you real, unbiased news analysis that cuts through political noise and delivers facts with context. Now let's get straight into this developing national story. To understand what is happening right now, we have to go back just a few days. The United States government recently faced a partial shutdown that started at the end of January 2026. Congress, which is responsible for approving federal spending, failed to pass a full funding agreement before the deadline. When the government doesn't get funding approval, several federal agencies are forced to pause operations, and thousands of federal employees either stop working or work without pay until funding is restored. This shutdown lasted for several days and created immediate concern across Washington and across the country. Eventually, lawmakers managed to pass a massive funding package worth approximately $1.2 trillion. That bill funded most government operations through September 2026, which temporarily ended the shutdown crisis. But here's where the real problem started. That funding agreement did not fully resolve the budget fight involving the Department of Homeland Security. The Department of Homeland Security is one of the most critical agencies in the United States government. It was created after the September 11th attacks to strengthen national security and coordinate multiple security and emergency response agencies under one umbrella. DHS controls airport security through the Transportation Security Administration, commonly known as TSA. It oversees immigration enforcement through agencies like ICE and Border Patrol. It manages disaster response through FEMA. It monitors cyber threats, protects infrastructure, and even operates the United States Coast Guard. In simple terms, DHS is responsible for protecting America from both external threats and internal emergencies. That means any disruption in DHS operations could affect travel, emergency response, immigration policy, and national security planning all at once. Right now, DHS is operating under temporary funding, which is essentially a short-term extension that allows the department to keep functioning while lawmakers continue negotiating a permanent budget solution. The problem is that this temporary funding has a deadline. If Congress fails to reach an agreement before that deadline, DHS could face a partial shutdown even if the rest of the government remains funded. That is exactly why this political fight has become one of the most watched and intense debates happening in Washington today. So what exactly is causing this conflict? The core of the dispute revolves around immigration enforcement and accountability reforms. Democratic lawmakers are pushing for significant changes to how immigration enforcement agencies operate. They are demanding stricter accountability rules for ICE agents and Border Patrol officers. These proposals include mandatory body cameras during enforcement operations, restrictions on officers wearing face masks during raids, stronger warrant requirements, and additional oversight mechanisms designed to prevent abuse of authority. Democrats argue that these reforms are necessary because of several controversial immigration enforcement incidents that have raised concerns about civil rights and transparency. On the other side, Republicans and allies of former President Donald Trump strongly oppose these proposed reforms. They argue that immigration enforcement agencies already face dangerous working conditions, and excessive oversight could weaken their ability to operate effectively. Republicans believe that forcing agents to follow stricter operational limitations could endanger officer safety and reduce their ability to prevent illegal immigration and criminal activities. They also argue that Democrats are using the funding process as leverage to push political immigration policies instead of focusing on national security priorities. Former President Donald Trump and his supporters have taken a particularly strong stance on this issue. Trump has consistently supported aggressive immigration enforcement and stronger border security policies. His political base views DHS as a critical enforcement tool that must remain powerful and flexible. Many Republicans believe that weakening DHS enforcement authority would send the wrong message internationally and could encourage illegal border crossings. This has turned the funding debate into more than just a budget discussion. It has become a symbolic political battle representing two completely different visions of immigration and national security policy in America. At this moment, negotiations are ongoing, but progress remains uncertain. Democratic leaders have stated they are unwilling to approve DHS funding unless accountability reforms are included. Republican leaders have indicated they will not support any funding deal that they believe restricts law enforcement operations. This political standoff has created a dangerous deadlock. If neither side compromises before the funding deadline, DHS could partially shut down, even while other government departments continue functioning normally. If DHS does shut down, the impact could be immediate and widespread. TSA officers, who are responsible for airport security screenings, are considered essential workers, which means they would likely continue working but without guaranteed paychecks until funding is restored. Historically, shutdowns have caused TSA staffing shortages because some workers are unable to continue working without pay. That can lead to longer security lines, airport delays, and travel disruptions across the country. Millions of passengers could face travel chaos if TSA staffing becomes unstable. Another major impact would be on FEMA, the agency responsible for responding to natural disasters such as hurricanes, floods, and wildfires. FEMA operations could slow down or face resource limitations during a shutdown, which could delay emergency assistance to communities facing disasters. Considering that climate-related disasters are increasing in frequency and intensity, any disruption in FEMA operations could have serious consequences for public safety and recovery efforts. Immigration enforcement operations could also face operational complications. While essential enforcement actions might continue, administrative processing, immigration courts, and certain support operations could slow down or temporarily stop. This could create backlogs in immigration cases and increase pressure on border enforcement agencies. Additionally, cybersecurity operations within DHS could experience staffing shortages, potentially weakening monitoring systems designed to detect cyber threats against U.S. infrastructure. Federal employees working under DHS could also face furloughs, meaning temporary unpaid leave. Government contractors working with DHS could lose income entirely during a shutdown. The economic ripple effect of federal shutdowns often extends beyond government employees and affects private sector workers connected to government operations. Local businesses around federal facilities often experience revenue losses during shutdown periods because federal workers reduce spending. Now let's step back and look at the bigger political picture. This DHS funding battle is not just about policy differences. It is also about political leverage and future election positioning. Immigration has become one of the most powerful and emotionally charged political issues in American politics. Both political parties understand that public opinion on immigration strongly influences election outcomes. By tying immigration reform demands to DHS funding, Democrats are attempting to push policy changes that might otherwise face strong opposition. Republicans, meanwhile, are using the funding debate to reinforce their political identity as strong defenders of border security and law enforcement authority. Another hidden political factor is public perception. Government shutdowns often create negative public reactions toward political leaders. Historically, whichever party is perceived as responsible for shutdowns tends to lose public support. Both parties are trying to avoid being blamed for causing national security risks, while simultaneously refusing to compromise on core policy beliefs. This creates a political chess match where every negotiation decision is carefully calculated based on media coverage, voter reaction, and upcoming election strategies. There is also a broader institutional concern at play. Repeated government shutdown threats weaken public confidence in federal institutions. Each shutdown raises questions about whether Congress can effectively manage basic government operations. International observers also watch these shutdowns closely because they can signal political instability within the United States. Financial markets sometimes react to prolonged shutdown risks because federal operations influence economic stability, regulatory enforcement, and government contract spending. Looking ahead, several possible scenarios could unfold. Lawmakers could reach a last-minute compromise that includes partial reforms and temporary enforcement protections, allowing DHS to receive long-term funding. Another possibility is a short-term extension that delays the crisis but does not fully resolve the political disagreement. The most concerning scenario would be a full or partial DHS shutdown if negotiations collapse completely. Historically, Congress often reaches agreements at the final moment, but recent political polarization has made last-minute compromises increasingly unpredictable. The next few days will be extremely important. Negotiations behind closed doors are continuing, and political leaders are making public statements designed to pressure the opposing party. Media coverage is intensifying, and public attention is growing as the deadline approaches. Federal employees and national security officials are closely monitoring the situation because operational planning becomes extremely difficult when funding stability is uncertain. One of the most important questions Americans are asking right now is whether political leaders are prioritizing national security or political messaging. Supporters of accountability reforms argue that strong oversight actually strengthens national security by increasing public trust and preventing abuse of power. Opponents argue that enforcement agencies need operational flexibility and quick decision-making authority to protect the country effectively. Both sides claim to support national safety, but they disagree deeply on how security should be balanced with civil liberties. This debate reflects a larger philosophical divide in American governance. Should national security agencies operate with maximum authority to respond quickly to threats? Or should they operate under strict oversight to protect individual rights and prevent misuse of power? That fundamental question is driving the DHS funding battle and shaping the entire negotiation process. For everyday Americans, this story may feel like distant political drama, but the effects could become very real if DHS funding collapses. Travel delays, disaster response slowdowns, immigration processing backlogs, and economic disruptions could directly impact millions of people. Federal employees and their families would face financial uncertainty. Communities relying on disaster recovery assistance could experience dangerous delays. Even cybersecurity protection systems could face operational limitations if staffing levels drop. At the same time, this political showdown could set long-term policy precedents. If accountability reforms are successfully tied to funding negotiations, future administrations may face stronger oversight requirements when managing enforcement agencies. If enforcement authority is preserved without additional oversight, immigration policy debates will likely intensify in future elections. Right now, America is watching another critical moment in its political system unfold. The countdown toward the DHS funding deadline is not just about passing another government budget. It represents a national conversation about security, accountability, power, and political responsibility. The outcome of this negotiation could shape immigration policy, enforcement authority, and national security strategy for years to come. As negotiations continue, one thing is certain: government shutdown battles are rarely simple financial disagreements. They are reflections of deeper political divisions that define the direction of the country. Whether lawmakers reach a compromise or push DHS toward another shutdown will depend on how far each party is willing to negotiate and how much political risk they are prepared to take. The coming days will reveal whether Washington can find common ground or whether political gridlock will once again disrupt critical government operations. Millions of Americans, federal workers, and security officials are waiting for answers, and the entire nation is watching closely as this high-stakes political drama continues to unfold. And that's why this story matters. Because sometimes the biggest decisions affecting national security and public safety don't happen on battlefields or campaign stages. They happen inside negotiation rooms, budget meetings, and political standoffs where policy, power, and public trust collide. The DHS funding battle is not just about dollars and deadlines. It's about how America defines security, accountability, and leadership in an increasingly divided political environment. Stay informed, stay aware, and keep watching, because this story is still developing, and the decisions made in Washington over the next few days could shape national policy and public safety across the United States for a long time to come.